Well, hey there, family, and welcome to a new day. You like my mask? Miss Bonnie made a bunch of these for the people in the office. It's Charlie Brown. Well, hey, welcome to a new day. Thanks for stopping by. Quick question for you. Who did you serve yesterday, and how did it look? Did you take the challenge and actually choose to serve members of your family yesterday? I'd love to hear about it. And as always, I'm really curious. What does your time with Jesus look like? Have you been able to spend time? Have you made the time? I know that a lot of you guys still aren't in school. That starts next week for you, and so I'm genuinely curious. How's it been? I do think we kind of need to have a conversation here, though. You know that this is just us talking, right? This is me pretty much just riffing. Excellent! On what God has been showing me devotionally in His Word. As I have sat down and I've read and I've asked questions of the text, as I've sought to summarize and note, then summarize, and sought to obey and meditate on it. This is just me talking. This is stuff that I'm wrestling through. What I hope you see, and I hope that you're encouraged by, is the sense that we're all pursuing the same thing. I haven't arrived. I'm pursuing Jesus the way that hopefully you're pursuing Jesus. And I'm just inviting you to come along with me as we pursue Jesus together. I don't want to make disciples of David. I want to make disciples of Christ. I want to help us follow Jesus closer together. And as we pursue this closer walk with Christ, it's okay to have questions. It's okay to be confused by the stuff that we read. We can work together to figure it out. It's even okay sometimes to not really want to get in the Word. And we'll talk about that probably tomorrow. The thing is, we get to do this together. And I think that's why community is so very important. That's why I would love for you to come hang out with me on Discord, or when we start doing some more hangout kinds of things. We need that encouragement that other people are spending time in the Word. Here's what God's doing in their life. Here's what I'm doing, and here's what God's doing in my life. We get to encourage one another to pursue Jesus. So let's do this. Let's take one small step in Christ, towards Christ, together today. With that said, let's jump back into the Word. We talked about Ezra yesterday, and today I thought we'd talk a little bit about Nehemiah. For me, it's the last book of the Old Testament that I got to read. It's like Nehemiah is the last narrative before we go to Malachi, who is the final prophet before the 400 years of silence. And so next week, I'm going to be able to jump into the New Testament, and I'm excited about doing that. Not because the Old Testament is bad or old, but because I've been in it for a long time, and I'm kind of excited about going back and reading more about Jesus and about how to live in light of Christ. So Nehemiah. If Ezra is about the rebuilding of the temple and the reestablishment of the law, Nehemiah is about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So Ezra and Nehemiah were contemporaries. They were there at similar times. And Nehemiah comes down, and he's the cupbearer to the king, and he gets permission to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. It's a really fascinating story about leadership and about getting things done. It's an interesting story about prayer. You know, people were kind of mocking Christians, or they were mocking our vice president about having a prayer gathering before talking about how to handle the COVID thing, and saying, well, this is great. Our president, our vice president's just counting on prayer. Well, in Nehemiah, he prays, and then he goes and he does the work. And I think that's a good way of looking at prayer. But Nehemiah comes in, he rebuilds the wall. There's opposition to that. This is written in first person. And so Nehemiah is sharing, this is how I have done things. We see the wall completed. We see a reestablishment of some of the roles for the temple. Nehemiah, does a good job of restoring and bringing people back into conformity with the law. It's actually a really great story. In my time with Jesus in this book, there were a few things that grabbed my attention, and I just want to share a couple of those with you. The first thing is that, just like in Esther, in Nehemiah, God remains pretty hidden. It's mentioned a couple of times. Nehemiah will say, the hand of the Lord was upon me. The good hand of my God was upon me. He'll say things like, God will protect us. And because it's written in first person, this is just Nehemiah sharing this is what he believes. But we don't ever see descriptions of like, and God showed up in this way, or and then God said, the way we see sometimes in the prophets or in the other books of the Bible. And that's where it's really cool. We don't actually see God, but we know that He is present and that He is working. Just like in Esther, We know that our good God is still working out his good purposes in these bad circumstances. Nehemiah is replete with praise for God. He's always attributing things to God. He's doing God hunts all the time, and that allows us then to celebrate, yeah, God really is working. Now you might be thinking, this sounds really familiar, David. Didn't we just talk about this in Esther? That's good. I want you to be reminded of these things. A lot of times we get so caught up in the novel. We want new things. We want novelty in our lives. But a lot of times we just need to be reminded of core and essential truths. Hang out with me long enough and you're going to hear me say a lot of the same things over and over and over again. Because in the end, I'd rather remind you of the truths that are really true than constantly be chasing new ideas that may or may not be true. And so if you're like, God, this sounds the exact same that we talked about with Esther. Yes, it does. Good. You're being reminded. We need to be reminded of these things. God works in the ordinary of life. Think about Jesus for a moment. I don't recall if I mentioned this earlier or not, but Jesus lived for 30 years and we know nothing about his early life. There's like a story of when he was 12. But by and large, 30 years of obscurity, 30 years of ordinary, 30 years of nothing, if you will. And then 3 years of extraordinary, 3 years of him preaching and proclaiming the gospel. That's a lot of times how God works. And you and I mean, you're 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, whatever you might be. I'm 40. It's kind of like, okay, what do we do with this? God works in the ordinary. God is present. God really is present, and he is working even now. And so seniors, there is no need to fear. God is working. I felt bad when I heard Eagle Crest has canceled prom and graduation. I know that for a lot of you seniors, maybe that's the angst. I haven't heard from my scholarships yet. I haven't heard from all my schools yet. A lot of the things that I was looking forward to are gone. They're not going to happen. God is working in those circumstances. There's no need to fear. For our extroverts who are stuck at home and need that interaction, listen, there's no need to fear. God knows where you are. God knows what's going on, and he is working in the midst of it. Parents, if you're listening to this, I know that suddenly you were thrust into the role of everything. There's no need to fear. God is still working in the midst of these circumstances. You're not going to mess up your kids beyond what he can fix. Youth, give your parents some grace as they try to figure this all out. Church, I know we can't get together. There's no need to be afraid. God is working in these circumstances. He is still present. He's still there. So that's the first thing, is that God still works in the ordinary. It's kind of fun to see that in Nehemiah as well as Esther. It's that encouragement that, yeah, this is actually a thing. A second thing I saw in this is that because Nehemiah is so confident that God is at work, he is constantly praying. As you read through Nehemiah, you can just see prayers recorded throughout the entire book. Every chapter seems to have one or two prayers. Some of them are actually like, here's what I'm praying to God, and it's like a full-on prayer listed. Other times it's just a mention. I was praying and fasting, as I always do, and then I went to the king, and the king said, why are you so downcast? And I prayed, and then I responded to God, or responded to the king. You've just got these mentions of prayer. And then every once in a while, you'll have these, like at the end of chapters, at the end of paragraphs, or at the end of particular events. You'll have Nehemiah just put in this quick little sentence. And you'll say things like, remember for my good, oh my God, all that I have done for this people. Or another place, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, oh my God, according to these things that they did, and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. There's just these little like sentence prayers, these little breath prayers that just constantly throughout the book of Nehemiah. And I love it because when we are convinced that God really is at work, when we know without a shadow of a doubt that God is sovereign over everything, we recognize our need for him in our lives. We recognize our dependence upon him. And so that leads us to be in constant conversation with him. Prayer doesn't have to be some high and lofty thing filled with these and thous and special language, special genuflection, special procedures. It's just your heart and your mind and your soul being poured out to God, and the listening that happens in response, the listening of your soul to what God might say. As one guy I really respect put it, you just pray what you got. Whatever you might have, the words you might have, the phrases, the ideas, whatever is in you, whatever emotion you have, just pray what you got. And so my challenge for you today, friends, is to spend some time in prayer. And I don't mean like what most of us tend to think when we say prayers, like you're just sitting on your couch and you're doing a bunch of other things and you just kind of like pray a little bit. No, I want you to really pray today. Get away. Turn everything off. Put everything away. Get alone. Get quiet. And spend a few minutes praying to God. And like I said, just pray what you got. And if you don't have the time or the space to put everything away, turn everything off, and get alone, well then that's okay. Just pray what you got in the space you've got right now. In fact, maybe after you finish this video, turn it off, get your heart set towards God and pray, asking Him, hey God, what do you have for me right now? Or lifting up those requests that you might have. So there you go, friends. My encouragement for you today, go and pray. So here we go. Take one small step towards Jesus today. Whatever that might look like, just take that one small step. And Lord willing, we'll see you back here tomorrow. God bless.